once more. Again, it is Happy Democracy Day, Nigeria. It has been 19 years since the journey began, and again, it's time for us to have some sober reflection on where the country stands and how she must move forward. Well, on the 29th of May 1999, a new constitutional democracy was established. And so this Fourth Republic was founded upon the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, which of course did free the judiciary from the bondage of military decrees. Well, now the judiciary is seen as the last bastion of succor is in focus once more in ensuring that this democratic process does continue. So in this next segment, we will be looking at the role of the judiciary in strengthening our democratic processes. And of course, joining me for this discussion at this moment, I have Barrister Mobisola Akerile, who is a commercial lawyer, several years of experience, and currently heads the Energy, Technology and Infrastructure Practice Group of Tayo Oyetibo. That's it. And then also joining us is Valentine Utulu, equally a legal practitioner and the managing partner and CEO of Legal Crest. He also, of course, is a political affairs analyst as well. And they're both here. Kind morning and welcome. Happy Democracy Day.
Thank you. Wish you
us. Yes. Okay, so this is what we always do on days like this. You know, we look at the journey so far of the democratic process. Where are we now? What more must we do? And what are some of the pitfalls we must avoid as we continue this journey? And the judiciary is playing a very, very important role in the democratic process, has been for a long time. So we want to assess, you know, look at to what extent the judiciary has been able to do that, and what more has to happen for us to have perhaps a smoother journey, if you like, or, you know, do it better. You know, so for me, I would always like to start with an assessment. You know, I mean, you are in those fields, so you can assess to what extent really have we done a good job in shaping democracy when it comes to judicial processes in all aspects. Let me start with the lady. Yes, please.
All right. Thank you very much. With respect to the, would I say, strides that the judiciary has made so far in the 19 years of uninterrupted democratic rule that we have had in Nigeria, I would say the judiciary is getting stronger. Landmark decisions have been made, you know, to uphold the rule of law. Particularly, you know, we've seen decisions in election petition matters, restoring mandates of governors that, you know, ordinarily seemed they had been pushed out by virtue of election malpractices. You know, the courts have been strong. The Supreme Court has also, you know, upheld elections, votes of governors, and that has gone a long way in restoring the confidence of people in the judicial system, knowing that, okay, if I go to court to litigate on this issue, I would get a positive outcome, at least I would get justice, you know. So I would say so far they've made progress, but certainly there are a lot of things that need attention. The time with which it takes to resolve matters generally, because everybody says, oh, if I go to court, it can take me such a long time, except for election petition cases where you know that the time is strictly limited. You've got to be done within 180 days, otherwise, you know, it's gone. So if we can look at that kind of system for other matters, you know, how that can be incorporated, then that can help the judiciary. But as to how well they've done, I think it's getting better.
Okay, yes. Did you share those sentiments?
Yes, to a large extent. I think that the judiciary has tried to champion democracy in Nigeria, although they are beset with a lot of problems, not of their own making as well. Although some of the elephant in the room actually is corruption, and they need to tackle that. But as to asserting their independence from the executive and the legislature, to a large extent, they have managed to do that. And they have been bold in giving judgments to defend the rights of the individual and as against the rights of the state. Nevertheless, unless they deal with the perception of corruption and are able to internally cleanse themselves, they will not be able to achieve the utmost for the society.
Okay. Okay. I'll get to the part of internal cleansing in a moment. You know, you said something about asserting the independence from the executive, and I do know there has been this issue about autonomy, the autonomy of the judiciary. I know there was a lot of talk about that and all of that, especially financially and all of that. To what extent has that impacted on the judiciary's ability to carry out its functions and, you know, do what they're meant to?
Financially, they have been very constrained. And because there are technologies that exist to assist the judiciary in its functions, Nigerian judiciary appears to exist in a time warp. They have not moved with time to employ the technologies needed to make adjudication easier. We don't have recording machines. We don't have, you know, there are things that apply in all parts of the world, but in Nigeria. Now, these things take money to implement. So the budget of the judiciary needs to be significantly improved so that they can improve on justice delivery. Apart from that, the issue of independence is such that the judiciary insists on disciplining its own officers, not by the executive. That's why there seems to be a tussle between the EFCC and the judiciary. But it's all well and good because it's an experiential knowledge that we are going through. And at some point in time, it will be clear who is supposed to discipline who. Right now, the judiciary has set up a committee to probe the corrupt judges that the EFCC has reported to it. That's it. That is a very welcome development. So that, I mean, justice will not only be done, it will be seen to be done. And the judiciary will be seen to stand above corruption. And if they can do that, then they can take their rightful place in society.
Okay, so we're talking about the judiciary itself punishing erring officials, as it were. And I do remember when that issue came up in the news, the major grouse of the executive, you know, was that the National Judicial Council was not doing what it was supposed to do in terms of punishing erring officials. You know, so do you think that they had it, you know, they were justified in saying that? Because that, of course, we saw led to the action of them raiding the houses of some of these officers and all of that. Do you think that the National Judicial Council didn't quite live up to its responsibilities when it comes to, you know,
well, I'll say expectations are different. The kind of discipline that the executive is expecting is different from the kind of discipline that the NJC would exercise over its officers. You know, queries, warnings, and then it can say, okay, suspended, that kind of thing. But the executive is looking at something stronger and saying, okay, we've got to take you to court and charge you for whatever it is, corruption, you know, perverting the course of justice, whatever it is that the executive says you need to be charged for. The NJC is not going to be saying, oh, we are charging you for perversion of the course of justice, but it's going to look at the code of conduct for judicial officers and then discipline them according to that code. And the decision, there was a decision in one of the cases of the judges that was, well, would I say, found wanting, you know, was basically to the effect that the NJC has to be through with its process first. You know, we follow our internal procedure, then you can now discipline them as, you know, in the court. So it has to be done. NJC will do its part, executive will also do its part. So it's actually a synergy. Both of them are responsible for the discipline, or would I say, bringing people to justice that way. NJC has to do its part, then the executive will do its part, but they don't do the same thing. So the expectations should not be the same.
Okay, so perhaps there was a misunderstanding in that regard.
The perception was that the NJC was slow to act, right? And that even when it acted, it gave the accused judges a soft landing.
A soft landing.
Yes, and people were scandalized by that kind of procedure. Because to the mind of any reasonable man, any judge that takes money to pervert justice is a common criminal and should be treated as such. So when you've gone through the disciplinary procedure of the NJC, then they boot you out so that you go and face the music in the court, just like any other citizen. Yes.
All right. We're looking at 19 years of uninterrupted democracy, as it were, and talking about the processes, you know, which you talked about in the beginning. You know, you talked about the length of time it takes for some cases to be treated in court, and okay, there's the matter of the prison congestion, but that's another matter. But do you think that within this time that there has been some improvement in terms of the period within which cases are being...
Yes, I would say so. I would say personally, from my personal experience, judges are now more conscious of the time it takes them to resolve matters. And when you're in court, you see that they are pushing you to do your cases quickly. They are giving shorter adjournments now. You know, before somebody could give you an adjournment like, say, a month, 2 months, sometimes. But now the judge is telling you, I'm not going to give you more than 2 weeks. And then when you come to court and then you have a flimsy excuse for not doing what you should, many of them are awarding higher costs than they used to. You know, before somebody could be awarding costs of 5,000 naira. I would say particularly in Lagos, but now you're looking at costs in the range of 50,000 naira, 100,000 naira, so that lawyers can sit up and then the process of resolution of disputes is faster. So I would say they are more conscious now that they have to deliver justice quickly, because really, like they say, justice delayed, I don't think it's justice denied, but it can lead to frustration. So they are more conscious now that things should be faster.
Okay, what about the prosecution, the preparedness of the prosecution? Because I do remember there were also some accusations leveled against the executive when certain cases were brought to court and they had to be thrown out for lack of merit or any of that. So, you know, in that regard, does that add to the time that it takes when there's a court session and nothing really can be done because there's not much of evidence?
Actually, the problem there is not with the prosecution, it lies with the investigation.
Okay.
Now, when the police officers responsible for investigation have not done a proper job, the prosecutor's hands are tied, and that is what messes up the case in court. Now, we need to employ forensics in investigation. And it's not about the torture of suspects. You need to have scientific investigation of cases so that by the time you bring the matter to court, you have evidence that can stand up in court. If you don't have evidence that can stand up in court, nothing is going to happen and the criminal will go scot-free. That has been the challenge. Now, and to solve that challenge, there has to be a greater synergy between the office of the prosecutor and the office of the investigator. They have to work together. Because if the investigator does not know what the prosecutor needs, they will be working at cross purposes. Now, that is what is needed to solve that problem. It's a structural and institutional problem that needs to be solved. It's not a problem with the courts, really, because the judge can only adjudicate on what you put before him.
Exactly. Yes, and adding to that, I would say that there's also the issue of investigation being concluded before the matter goes to court. Because we've seen cases where, okay, the investigation was not completely concluded, the case was filed, and then the prosecutor was stuck because no evidence, that kind of thing. So this synergy also relates to the fact that the investigation has to be finished and thorough, then the case can be put in court.
Absolutely. Now, in moving forward in this journey called democracy, if you ask most people, and on different platforms where these discussions, similar discussions are being held, and people are asked, so what is the greatest challenge that we have? And like you mentioned earlier, they would tell you it is corruption. Corruption here, corruption there, corruption in every aspect of life and all of that. And that perhaps does apply to the judiciary as well. How do we begin to deal with it if we're going to have a smooth democratic process, if we're going to have a judiciary who will play its role as it is supposed to in also shaping our democracy? What do we do about corruption?
Yes, in recent times, there have been very heartwarming developments in the polity regarding that. I've noticed that the EFCC has begun to do a more thorough investigation, and they have started to bring their petitions through the right channel, that is the NJC. Now, when they gather these facts and send them to the NJC as is proper, the NJC now, the onus is now upon the NJC to do a proper investigation based on the facts before it. Because what they are giving the NJC here, records of the bank transactions, where the judges are receiving money from counsel, receiving money from people that they ought not to receive, phone records, etc. Now, these things are indelible, indisputable things that once the NJC sees it, it must take a decision. Now, once you are able to establish that, once you are able to find the digital footprint of the perpetrator of the crime and give it to the right authority, you have done more than 50% of the job. The next thing is to adjudicate on the facts that you have given the authority. So the EFCC no longer needs to take a judge to court and the matter will be thrown out halfway because the NJC has not adjudicated on it. Let the NJC adjudicate. When they have found the judge guilty and dismissed him from service, then you take him to court.
Yes.
So these are good developments. When the senior advocate Mobike was found guilty by the Lagos State High Court of trying to prevent the course of justice, I was very happy, not because I had a personal grudge against him, but the sentence was just 1 month, but it was far-reaching because for the first time I actually saw the EFCC do a good job. Not just on the pages of newspaper, they presented good evidence before the court, on which the court could decide. Now that is the way we should go, because there is no crime that does not leave a footprint. Every bribery leaves a footprint. So if you're able to trace that and hand it over to the right authorities, people will be dissuaded from corrupt acts.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that? We're looking at dealing with the issue of corruption.
Would I say strengthening the whistleblower policies, particularly for judiciary. We've seen it for other areas, but people need to come forward. If you are being approached to offer or to give a bribe, or that, okay, your case will go this way if you do this, you should be able to speak up and make your representations to the appropriate authorities anonymously. So I would say, in addition to what he said, the whistleblower policy in the judiciary should also be driven amongst lawyers, amongst judges. Yes, that would help and go a long way.
And that would make the EFCC able to do sting operations. Because if somebody's asking you for money and you mark the money and you give to the person, when they catch him, you cannot
catch the perpetrators. Okay, I'm going to ask one last question, and that has to do with negotiations outside of courts. To what extent have we improved? Is it better now? Is it even the more preferred option, you know, like trying to settle disputes outside of court amicably without all of that, you know, court proceedings and all of that? You know, so from your experience, where are we, and are we improving? Is it getting better in line?
Yes, I would say so. It's getting better. We're making giant strides in out-of-court resolution of disputes. There are actually professional bodies set up for that, and the Lagos State government is doing a lot in that regard as well. You know, there's a week in every year. There are about 2 weeks, a half year. That's between January and June. There's 1 week that's for settlement. Then the other half of the year, sometime in November, there's another week, like it's called Settlement Week in the Lagos State Judiciary. So where you come, you apply, your cases are set down for amicable resolution. And in that 1 week, in fact, the resolution is actually free. So the government encourages it. And then even amongst lawyers, you evaluate the case that you are dealing with, and you look at it, okay, is this something that is better and even cheaper for your clients to resolve out of court than go to litigation. And then sometimes, even when you start litigation, in the middle of litigation, you can resolve your disputes out of court, and then you do your terms of settlement. So I'll say, yes, we are making progress, because people are more, particularly when you're commercially inclined, the truth is you are less litigation inclined than just resolving it outside. Let's do this thing quickly and then move on with our business. Exactly, that's how it goes.
Yes, okay, your last words on that.
Actually, because the system has been strengthened, and we have managed to try to abridge the time that it takes for cases to be heard, negotiations actually have more chances of success. Because if somebody thinks that you can delay forever, he will not be willing to negotiate. But once the court process is more predictable, people come to the table more willing, knowing that it is better you meet your adversary quickly before the full judgment is slammed on you. So yeah, we've made progress.
Okay, definitely we have made progress, and you know, like we say, democracy is a journey, and as we move along, progress is expected, and the way that things are done can be improved on, and that applies to every facet of the country. So talking about the judiciary as well, we cannot deny that progress has been made, but we can do more. And of course, it behooves on the judiciary and the stakeholders to do what they have to do to ensure that Nigeria's democracy is strengthened. Well, I did have the pleasure this morning of discussing with Barrister Mobisola Akerele, a commercial lawyer and currently I'm heading the Energy, Technology and Infrastructure Practice Group of Tayo Oyetibo. And with her has been Barrister Valentine Utulu, who is the managing partner and CEO of Legal Crest, equally being a political affairs analyst. Thank you very much for coming today, being Democracy and sharing your thoughts on how we can do it better and how we can move the country forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Well, there you have it. The show does go on in a moment, so stay tuned.